Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. If you're listening to the audio, if you're listening to the video, welcome. I'm Steve Green, your host. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And it is a pleasure, and yet I wish I didn't have to do this episode, but it's so important to who we are as firefighters. Current, future, and past. And today we also speak for those who are no longer with us. My guest today is Diane Cotter. If you're in the fire service and you don't know that name, then you've had your headphones on too long and you're wearing blinders. Because Diane and her husband, Paul, who is a former firefighter in Worcester, Mass., which was just the first major city west of where I grew up, Framingham, 19 miles was all that separated us. And I was in that city many times with my late father driving us to Spags. We used to go shopping for all little toys and trinkets at Spags like once a month. But when I heard about this firefighter, this brother from so close to where I grew up, something, I don't know, just struck a tone with me. And I decided I have to kind of find out a little bit more about it. But I had spoken with one person in one of the cancer support networks. And she said to me, look, if you want to learn about cancer in the fire service, you got to talk to this lady named Diane Cotter. And it is an honor, a privilege, and a personal love for me to have and welcome Diane to today's podcast. Welcome
Thank
aboard.
you, Steve. Thank you. I'm so honored.
Well,
So
you'd be honored to come to me. I'm more honored that you agreed to come on the show again. We've been on twice, once on the phone only, and then one other video once after we started getting to go on this. And the education that Diane gave me, and I think we must have spoken 2 hours on the phone that day, but I was uninformed. I was doing this podcast and I thought, I kind of knew what I needed to know. What I didn't know anything really about or didn't know it properly was the cancer battle in the fire service. Now, again, I had only got to serve 8 years before I got hurt, and I've been out since 85. That's longer I've been out than a lot of you who are firefighters listening have been alive. But the fact is that I thought I knew a lot about it. And yes, I was aware of number of illnesses and we had line of duty deaths from those who worked the pile in New York. And that's what I thought it was. People who worked the pile. I couldn't believe that other firefighters were just getting cancer a lot. And then I started seeing other stories about cancer in general and the carcinogens in the materials that are burning today that I did not have in my day when I started. We had real wood furniture. We had pillows that were filled with Kapok, not polyester. And we had gasoline, we had flammable liquids, but we didn't have what we face today. And it was this other person, Cindy L., who's a doll also, and she was a great person who pointed me to you. And she said, Steve, you got to learn more about what's going on with the firefighter cancer situation. And so she started me, and then she says, if you really want to hear what's going on, you got to talk to this lady, Diane Cotter, in Worcester, Mass. And I said, Worcester? I grew up right around the corner from there. She goes, you did? Do you know? I said, no, I grew up in a different town, but which is now a city. Framingham became a city a couple of years ago, finally. But I said, no, I don't know her, but yeah, I'd love to talk with her and learn more. She goes, you're going to learn a crap load if you talk to her. And we sent some emails. I got your email. We sent some emails back and forth, and you were kind enough to pick up the phone and call me. And those 2 hours, you gave me an education that I never expected to have to hear or to hear. And her husband, Paul, who was a firefighter in Worcester, Mass., and in line to become lieutenant or a captain?
He became lieutenant.
Lieutenant, right. And shortly after that, was diagnosed with, well, at that moment when he was diagnosed, it was diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
No cause yet. We didn't know anything yet. And he went ahead and did what he had to do. And then what went on from there? Let's go back to that, Diane. Let's go back to, all right, he's diagnosed. We haven't heard about PFAS yet. We do know that, yes, firefighters, things that burn today had a lot more carcinogens than in my day. So what happened at that point?
So when Paul was diagnosed with cancer, that was October of 2014, and he had a radical prostatectomy in January of 2015. And due to the complications of the surgery, he could not return to the job. He was medically retired. At that point, when he was facing, his future, he became so withdrawn and I have to say depressed. He wasn't going back to the love of his life,
Right.
which was his job. And I just saw him day after day sitting in a reclining chair, becoming more and more withdrawn, and it was destroying me. And I began researching firefighter cancer. And we had known a lot about firefighter cancer because Boston was doing a lot of
Right.
work on firefighter cancer. So in Worcester, we were aware of it, but it was never going to happen to Paul because he was, was the Rock,
Right.
the Arnold Schwarzenegger in the firehouse, and you know, I love the image when he tells us that he would get on the loudspeaker and say, "All right, everybody up in the weight room now, we're going to lift like men," you know. And he challenged the young guys to climb the three-story pole on Franklin Street Firehouse. I mean, he was just too big for cancer. But it hit. And, when you hear those words, it's cancer, it's devastating. And the research began when I started to investigate a God-driven purpose. I have to say that clearly because I say to people that there was a voice, but what I don't make clear is that it was a voice of my Lord was telling me to keep looking, keep looking. And I was driven, and the research was done online. I found that there was a firefighter from New Jersey that that had a horrific death because his gear failed and he succumbed to his steam burns. That led me to look at, well, what the heck is in the gear? What the heck is the gear made of? And that's where I found the Nomex and the Kevlar. And then shortly after the Nomex and the Kevlar, I started to research the institutions, and I saw that the IAFF in 1999 had put out a safety alert about a BreatheTech's moisture barrier. So I read through it and I started to look up one word and then another word. And I was saying, well, why is the IAFF threatening to sue manufacturers who won't recall this degrading moisture barrier? And I found out that things weren't quite what they seemed in magazines, that they
Right.
got your back and we got your back, and all you need is us. And that's where I emailed so many people. I mean, I can't even tell you, thousands is not an exaggeration. And one of them was Erin Brockovich, and she called and she said, Diane, I've gotten your emails, and I have a New Hampshire fire chief who tells me he has 13 firefighters with cancer. And I was so unaffected. I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. Every firehouse is a cancer cluster. So we spoke, and she said, is there PFOA or PFOS in the gear? I said, oh God, I don't even know what that is. We hung up the phone, And it took seconds to find that there was already actions happening in Europe about this chemical, and thus the rabbit hole opened up.
Right, right. And she had already dealt with PFAS in West Virginia, right? Hadn't
No, so her fight was, I want to say, hexachloroion.
okay.
And yes, and I want to say that's in it was in Northern California. I
Oh,
forget where in
okay.
California. But so Erin Brockovich, the movie Erin
Right,
Brockovich,
sure, sure.
but it was our Rob Balot that was dealing with the PFAS in West
Oh,
Virginia.
that's okay.
And his fight began in I think it began in 2000, and I first contacted Rob in 2016 or 2017. I can't remember now. But he got 160 emails from me and
And that
replied
was the
with what
first day, that was the first day. And then when
could have been. And he replied fascinating. And I had no idea that he was still so neck deep in his fight in Ohio and West Virginia. But he took this on. Yeah.
yeah, and that was an angel on your shoulder too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we were lucky to have him on the show. And I think that that was probably one of our most listened to episodes
That's awesome.
because of his message. And we all have known attorneys. Some of us see him on TV and we think one thing, and some of us have dealt with him in court and it's another thing. But he was in the interview. He is so professional, but so personal. He
Oh.
has that way of, when he's talking with you, he's talking with you, not at you or to you. He's talking with you,
Mhm.
and his explanations and what he explained to us on that episode, I think really carried far in the winds. That was probably one of our ones that we got probably close to, if not over the 40 countries
Wow,
who
that's
listened
fabulous.
to that. And now, whenever we do any episode dealing with firefighter cancer and the PFAS, things like that, we get really high connections across the world, because this is not unique to us. And for some of our listeners, if you haven't seen or heard this yet, that it's estimated that 90 something percent of the 7 billion people on this planet are infected with PFAS, PFOS in their bodies at some levels. Well, some people, and I remember saying this once, and someone said, well, so that's just a little bit. What can it do to me? I said, that's the question you don't want to ask yourself. What can it do to me?
Mhm.
And the better phrase question would be, what will it do to me?
Right.
So I think that this has now become a worldwide issue. The people, I'm sure if you watch TV, you see a lot of these ads for the Camp Lejeune case, which is dealing with two things, actually. It's dealing with chemicals that were buried improperly on the base, but it's also dealing with the PFAS in the which is part of the AFFF, aqueous film forming solution, which is a foam type application. We use flammable liquids, certain chemical fires and things like that. And while that was great, matter of fact, in my department in North Carolina, we were talking about before we started recording, my chief was a specialist in flammable liquids fires. And so he had a very good deal with 3M. They liked him very much because he taught that. And so we had probably 100 5-gallon pails in storage in our department. And we had, the first one, engine 171 had it, 72, the Quint, the snorkel had two, 172 had it, and the two tanks. We had 5 of our apparatus carried AFFF on them. I was lucky that I never got any on me. whatsoever, because if I was wearing bunker gear, I mean, if it was even being used, I was wearing bunker gear, but I never got involved in those, uh, in the firefighting that we needed to use it. It was basically used for practice and learning, because we were on second due for an airplane crash on the airport property, because we were the closest one to the airport in the county, and primary on building fires on the airport. So we had to go through this training to make sure we knew how to put out an aircraft fire with AFFF. But I was very lucky and never came in touch with it at either department I was in. But that doesn't lessen the fact that the exposure has been there for years. And some of the facts that you and Graham, I'm sorry, I say Dr. Graham Peasley, the chief of nuclear science at Notre Dame University, who's been on the show twice, and a gentleman of gentlemen, great guy, nice guy, patient as the saints, as you might say. But he was so touched by the letter that you sent to him, as, again, I'm just a firefighter's wife, which was how she'd often start off those letters. I'm just a firefighter's wife. But you rang his bell and he answered the door, and thank God he did. Right. Because the testing that the two of you worked on to gather pieces, well, let's go back before we even do that. We have to understand how far back PFAS goes. I don't know if all our listeners really realize that PFAS is nothing new. Correct. In corporate chemicals.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you tell us how far, what you've learned? Please?
Sure. There's so much material out there right now, but in the course of all of the years that I've been in this, in my best recollection, it goes back to the disaster that was the USS Forrestal. And 3M partnered with the U.S. Naval Research Laboratories to get a quick-acting surfactant in the event of a disaster, like what happened with the Forrestal. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that it began in the early 60s, but what also began in the earliest days was the research on the effects of the chemicals right directly in the labs of 3M. So 3M had people that were studying health effects on lab animals, on water within the systems there in the ground, at the Minnesota plant. And it's all just so very fascinating, because there was so much information that they withheld from, I want to say, the front line, and that means you firefighters. And I began immersing myself in research, and I've written 90 articles on Medium about this, with these, what I think are very deep dives into cross-referencing members of 3M and members of NFPA. And I'll give you just a quick sidebar on one of the things that I discovered. There was a Dr. Tavares, Tavres, who worked for 3M, and he did the medical studies, so he was aware of the information that was in his grasp. But he also served as chairman of the NFPA, AFFF. Yeah. So you never got that information. Had it gotten to you, I don't know what the outcome would have been, but there's been so many fights in this, Steve. It was staggering, that the information. We finally saw I think it was 2017, there was a letter leaked to the press from one of the NFPA foam committee members, a voting member, and they were called his private notes, his minutes. They didn't look like minutes to me. They looked like the real notes. And at any event, he wrote in 2001. So the leak came in 2017, but his notes were from 2001, that the mood of the members of the NFPA voting members was somber because 3M just announced that it was leaving the 8FFF manufacturing to DuPont because the chemicals were PBT. Maybe I got that wrong, but it was persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. And I can remember reading in that note that 1 was bad, 2 was horrifying, and 3 was deadly. So again, this was known in 2001, and only the leak made people in power have to listen. There was a great article, and Rob Ballot is involved in that article, and you can find all that material on my website, which you laugh at because the name of it, Your Turnout Gear in PFOA.com. But I only did that because I thought I'd be in this for about 2 weeks. And we're going on, year 9.
Year 9. Right. Right. And I think for some of you listeners who aren't firefighters and you say, well, that's really a shame. I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't have anything to worry about. That's not true, because what we're talking about, PFOS and PFAS, its first major public use was in Teflon. Those fried pans that wouldn't stick anymore. So you wouldn't have to put oil or butter in it. You could just cook your eggs or cook your bacon right there, and you didn't have to worry about it, just washed right clean. Well, we all ran out and bought pots and pans with Teflon in it, never realizing, never knowing to even be able to realize that every time we heated up that pan, we were releasing the toxins from the material into the air right around us in our homes. And so that is one of the reasons, between that and non-proper controls of wastewater, that these chemicals have gotten into the water table and the ground table of basically around the world, unless we're talking about certain indigenous tribes that have never been outside of their little area, because they drink natural water, from a spring. But you know what? There's no guarantee anymore that spring isn't contaminated. So we have to, keep that in mind. So every one of us, you don't have to be a firefighter. Every one of us is exposed to, has most likely have been exposed to, and continue, unless we take certain safeguards, to be exposed to PFAS and PFOS. And I shared with Diane a couple of weeks ago that I finally had my hematologist. We had talked about this when I first went to him in 2016. I was just learning about the Firefighter Cancer Initiative, but he didn't know about it. So I started teaching him, since I was a firefighter, and I told him I was concerned, to the point where, so he started watching me. And in 2018, when I had another scare, we went ahead and did the bone marrow assay. And I thought it was going to be a big surgical procedure. No, we did it right in his office. There was a minimal discomfort, and it came out clear, no problem whatsoever. And I was happy with that. And even when I took sick back in 2020, and we couldn't get a diagnosis for a positive diagnosis for almost 2 years, one of the things he did tell me is that I know this is not cancer, because I would have seen the earliest traces in the bone marrow when we did the test in 2018. I said, you don't think we need to do it again? He goes, no. If I did, but now, over these years that he and I have been together as doctor and patient, then becoming friend and teacher student, but I've been the teacher. to teach him about the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. Now it's very important to him. And he's been in touch with the people at the people who just on our show last week from the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center Firefighter Cancer Initiative here in South Florida. And it's very important to him now, that to the point where he asks men and women coming in, are you or have you ever been a firefighter? Because he wants to know what he needs to look for. And luckily, at my last regular visit, not a necessary visit, but my regular 6-month visit, he was able to get authorization from Medicare to give me the PFAS battery, and everything was clear. So I thank God for that. And it's less worry on my head, because if you're a firefighter and you hear the story about Paul Cotter, you need to pause and take a second. Okay? And it's there, but for the grace of God go I. Okay? And we know that Paul's not alone. There are thousands of our brothers and sisters who have dealt with this, some successfully and some unsuccessfully. But the fact is, it's who we are, it's what we do, and we're not going to let this change us. We just have to be more careful about what we do, while we have people like Diane and Rob Ballot and Graham Peasley working for us, for the betterment of society. And people, this is not a matter of, are you a resident alien? Are you an alien? Are you a citizen? No, this is anybody who lives anywhere, basically. This affects you. Doesn't matter what your religion is, doesn't matter what your belief system is. This affects every single one of us. Now, this is not a scare show. We're not trying to scare you.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about reality. Thank God Paul's around. They're living in New Hampshire, and they're having a great time up there. And they're not too far from a friend of my good friend from when I was in the fire department outside Syracuse. And, coming from Massachusetts, it's a beautiful state. So I went to camp for a number of years up in Epping, New Hampshire, east of Concord, about 17 miles east of Concord.
Racetrack.
Yeah. And the fact is, though, that yes, we see TV ads and spots all the time. But here's another dose of reality that we got about this disease. I started the fire service in 1977 as a volunteer. Never thought about anything like this. I wanted to learn what it took to be a firefighter. I did my best, went to extra training, etc. When Dr. Peasley from University of Notre Dame in Indiana wanted to really do a thorough testing of the bunker gear, after he had spoken with Paul and Diane and other people, he really wanted to get the best sample he possibly could. So he got new and used bunker gear all the way back. Oh, that's right. The year was 1977, all the way to 77. So when I heard that, I said, 77. Okay, those are my days. And then we had him on the show. Both of you were on for the results.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, yeah, there was PFAS in 77. Mm-hmm. Now, I already was guilty, felt so much guilt, because by now we already knew about carcinogens on our gear, on our bunker gear. When we did the overhaul, that we'd take our bunker coats off to get a little more air, because we were sweating from fighting the fire. But the fact of the matter is that when you find out that, okay, you had all this stuff, and I was bringing because I was a volunteer, so sometimes I had to leave my gear at the station, sometimes I put it in the trunk of my car, in the back seat, but sometimes I bring it into the house, especially during the winter, because we lived up in Syracuse, and I'd sleep in long john so I could just step into my bunker gear and pull it on. The fact is that I exposed my family all the time, because we never cleaned our bunker gear unless there was something disgusting on it, like, somebody puked on us or something like that. But we didn't. That carbon on our gear was a sign of our macho firefighter egos.
Of course.
you know? And so then when the test came back that there was PFAS in gear in 77, both new and used, now I'm thinking, oh my God, am I adding this to the pile of my screw ups with my family? And luckily, in a private conversation, Dr. Beasley said, I would not worry about the family from your gear because they didn't wear it. They weren't really in touch with it. So I wouldn't worry about PFAS in your gear. Yeah, was the stuff that you didn't wash off, that wasn't so great to expose them to. But he says, but I don't think your family has to worry about the PFAS from your gear in 77. But it was also my gear from 81 to 85 until I got hurt. So my gear up in upstate New York, where I was in the volunteer department, also had PFAS in it. All our gear of the time. So I can't say for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if the gear that Roy and Johnny wore on emergency, probably, and although those firefighters that we remember we watched today, and we miss Captain Stanley, who passed away, Mike Norrell passed away a couple of weeks ago. But the fact is that all that gear has PFAS in it. And if it wasn't for Diane's being that mother bear, we joked about this before we started recording, but this mother bear complex of taking care. Why did Paul get sick? He's a firefighter. Yeah, he could get hurt. We know that. Could be worse. But we know that risk going into it as family of firefighters. But why did he have to get sick? Where did this come from? And if she had just accepted it and said, okay, honey, we'll get you all the best medical care, we'll get the union will be behind us and everything like that. We'll take care of you. That would have been probably what thousands of other wives did. But Diane wasn't satisfied with that. You don't just get cancer because you're a firefighter, especially this type of cancer. There was no correlation between what we did and testicular cancer. We didn't know anything about it. So, good.
There's so many aspects of that, Steve, where you're absolutely spot on. You were talking about products of combustion is what you were aware of.
Right.
And that absolutely, when we first started in this fight, we would always be very careful to say, we're not saying that it's only PFAS that is causing cancers. We know that the products of combustion are carcinogenic, but the great deception is the fight that was put up when we started to elevate this issue. And thank God for media, because we had John Marr in 2017, March of 2017, John Marr published an article that I wrote, and he named it "The Real Cancer in Your Gear." And it went viral. It was shared thousands of times. Unbeknownst to John or I, 9 days after that was shared, the first series of emails came out between Lion Gear, Steadfast, I believe, and W.L. Gore. And the intent was to pull up information in case they needed ammo because of this article. So there was an article they pulled up from maybe Patagonia that I looked at and said, oh, that's a raincoat. That is nothing compared to what we know is on your gear. And that led to Station Pride putting out the series of articles where Graham and John Marr broke down the findings of that first sample that I sent. Then I partnered with Last Call Foundation, and we began the underground network of firefighters who would provide 30 years or 20 years worth of new gear and decommissioned gear, matching, both to both, sending them to Notre Dame University, and, those going into the lab, and finding out that Graham's students were so concerned about the PFAS that was coming off on their hands that Graham said, "Stop right now, everybody gloves." And they had to handle your gear, your new gear, with gloves. And that became the when our study was published in June of 2020, it was truly staggering to know now. What Graham has come out and said is that he felt somewhat intimidated to publish this because no one had done it before. And this was going to, upend everything in the fire service. Well, it did, kind of. But we had to combat industry and institutions that weren't being honest with you. We would have Dr. Krostowski from Lion Gear and promulgate the volleyball and tennis ball debate of the exponent study. And in those days, industry was putting that out to you. And so they'd say, "Well, what about the Peasley study?" And Lion Gear would say, "Well, what does Peasley know? He doesn't work with firefighters." And yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
That was the machine. We had to combat the machine. And, it was, sadly, it was filtered in through the labor union. It was filtered in through the NFPA. And that changed rapidly when Ed Kelly took control.
Right.
And he's got this. Let me tell you, he's got this, and he's.
If you're the mama bear of this, he is the guardian watchdog now.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're in such a good place. I can't even tell you. And I think that's why I'm smiling. In fact, I know it's why I'm smiling again, is because there's no worries as far as not making this the issue that it needs to be, with education, legislation, litigation. I mean, as you know, Burned debuted in Las Vegas in January, and it just was one of the proudest moments of our life, was to see the president of the labor union behind this in such a big way. I don't want that to sound like he just came out in 2021. No, he educated himself. He certainly doesn't need me to speak for him, but his campaign was about transparency and cancer and removing the chemical corporations from the labor union. That's
Right.
what needed to be
And
done.
I think also it's important that, and you mentioned this before, we knew that Boston was one of the first major urban centers that decided they were going to do something about cancer in their fire department. And they produced this video, and I think they produced it in 2017, released in 2018, because that was the first year I taught at the Florida Fire School. I taught it 2018 and saw this video and which moved me to tears. And so Ed Kelly is still, even though he's president of the IAFF, he is still a Boston firefighter. And he works his shifts just like every other Boston firefighter does. But he brought this Papa Bear demeanor to this fight. He didn't just say, well, if you make me president, I'll see what I can do about this kind of a cancer malarkey, whatever it is, and I'll look into it. No, he's been on the war path.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know of him when he wasn't the president of IAF. Prior to that, yes, I'm always attuned to Boston Fire on my scanner app, and when I'm up back at home, which I'll be going back in August, and I'll be visiting a couple of chiefs that I know there. But President Kelly was always going to take care of firefighters in the Boston Fire Department before this ever happened. And he lived up to his words at his first address as president. And the IAFF took it to the point where the 2020, right? The 2020, because it was, or 21, the
21. So 2020, I think, was the election year. In 2021, he was
Right.
inducted as president.
Right, and that was the year that they had the vote.
Yes.
And that that vote. Well, look, that's a little bit more of common. That's only a couple of years old, so we'll get back into that. And so what we're going to do, folks, here, we're going to take a quick break. We think we've covered pretty well the history. Diane and I have had so many phone calls, so many emails we share together. We're almost like family. In my book, I feel that I call them. He is my brother. She's my sister-in-law, if you want to call it that.
You bet.
But the fact is that this fight has been as important to me for firefighters and for Paul. So we're going to be right back and talk about what's going on today. Where are we today with my guest, Diane Cotter, right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. My guest today is a friend and advocate for the Firefighter Cancer Initiative, and that is Diane Cotter. Her husband, Paul, a former firefighter in Worcester, Mass., very close, like within less than 20 miles from where I grew up outside of the Boston area, was diagnosed in 2014. Thank goodness he had successful surgery, and he's doing okay now, right? Thank God.
Yes. Yeah. Thank God.
And so in the first section, we talked about what brought us towards today, the past 5 or 6 years of talking about this, seeing what's happening with it to where it's grown today. And now we're going to talk about where we are today and what we're looking at tomorrow. First and foremost, I want to say that I can't sit here and tell you, and Diane can't sit here and tell you, if your gear has less PFAS than this guy and this manufacturer saying, well, we've removed PFAS. And we can't tell you the veracity of any of that. You have to do your own homework on that. What we can tell you is the information we've given. We know that PFAS has been in our gear for decades. And we know that PFAS is a known carcinogenic. That's what we know. We also have anecdotal research that shows that the cancers, as we mentioned just before we took the break, the cancers caused by PFAS, PFOS are very aggressive forms. It's not just another cancer. It's a very aggressive form. And so we want to make sure that if you are a firefighter, you're a fire member of a firefighter's family, you're a fire buff, that we're giving you the best information that we have as of today from the excellent sources that we've spoken about so far. Now, to bring us a little bit closer to where we're up to today was at the end of the last segment, Diane was telling us about the new president of the IAFF, Ed Kelly, Boston firefighter for many years. And at the national convention of the IAFF, which was done by Zoom in 2021 due to the pandemic, there was an overwhelming, I don't mean just a little bit, there was an overwhelming vote in favor of the union no longer accepting any funding whatsoever from the known manufacturers of PFAS or sellers of equipment with PFAS, unless and until it is proven without a doubt that the chemicals and the dangers of the chemicals are gone. And it was a very, very strong unanimous vote through that meeting. And it was truly a freeing moment for you and for our good friends, Sean Mitchell and Jeff Burns, who, assistant chief, I think now, Sean Mitchell, when we knew him, he was just a little boy as a captain. And now he's assistant chief in Nantucket, right?
Yes.
Nantucket, right? Was fighting because of cancer he saw with a couple of firefighters in his department in Nantucket. And he was upset by that, and he had to figure out what can we do about that. And Jeff Burns in Fall River, he wound up being the union rep from his first day on the job almost, and he was fighting it because he had to bury 2 or 3 of his close friends from the fire service in Fall River, all to aggressive forms of cancer. So for them, for Diane, for all the wives, the husbands who have seen their spouses or their brothers or sisters, parents or children be hit by cancer and they're in the fire service, this kind of vote, which, by the way, although it was done by the International Association of Firefighters, which is their union, this was for the betterment, and all the discussion has nothing to do with whether you're a career firefighter or volunteer fighter or part pay or WUI. Everything that these law firms are doing, and that Ed Kelly is speaking about as a representative, as the president of the IAFF, we care about every single firefighter. We don't want any firefighter, no matter how you're a firefighter, why you do it. We don't want a single one of you to have to suffer with this diagnosis, because there are ways that we can mitigate it. We've learned, we're making some headway with good decon on site before we leave a working fire scene and when we get back to the station. We're doing better with that. We have so much. Look at the technology in the last 5 years, ladies and gentlemen. What we have the automatic venting in the Bay Area. We have the exhaust vents themselves that have magnetic connections to the apparatus. We have air purifiers now. We have separate bunking areas to reduce cross-contamination. We have no contact areas where you cannot go into this area until you've taken off all your dirty gear, taken a shower, then you can go back into the main living area. We're seeing a lot of these things happening, and this is great. This is a start. But nothing will be as good as knowledge.
Absolutely.
Self-knowledge, as we've learned.
That's right.
And I've been lucky enough that Diane and Dr. Peasley and Attorney Rob Ballot have kind of adopted me as the bastard child to help. They were all on the webinar we did a year and a half ago on this. They were all guests here. That webinar was open to anybody who wanted to take it. Anyone to just get a ticket, that was open for. We want this information to go across the board to anybody connected to the fire service, whether you're an active member, retired, it's your family, whatever. We want you to know the best information that's available. And you have, by the way, we're going to put this in the show notes, but there's stuff that Diane writes that you can read. The Last Call Foundation phenomenal organization that is one of the bulwarks at the front of helping us get this message out. And we're going to put this kind of information, also how you can see the movie Burn, we'll put that in the show notes as well. So we have the vote in 2021. It's the same year that Ed Kelly is inducted as the president of the union. And we see a whole new face of the IAFF.
Oh, I don't know if it's a 180 or a 360, but when he came out swinging. He has taken on cancer like no one before him. He's become an activist. He gave the keynote address at Environmental Working Group, and he's one of the greatest speakers I've ever seen. If you get the chance to listen to his speeches, they're phenomenal. They're powerful, they're moving, but he possesses extraordinary knowledge. And Sunday, June 11th, we premiered Burned at the Hanover Theater in Worcester. And I'm so proud of the panel that we put together, because we had Rob Ballot, Graham Peasley, General President Ed Kelly, Jim McGovern, and you combined two of my personal heroes, Jeff Kanabe and Jason Burns, and they were both there. And we had the PFAS law firms. So they were all guest panelists. And one of the things that President Kelly told us, that he was aware that the instruments used to measure the blood of firefighters that had taken a PFAS test needed to be recalibrated, because the instruments didn't go up as high. I know, isn't it's sickening. I get sick to my stomach when I hear that. And I wish I didn't know as much as I knew, or think I knew, about the how PFAS works when it gets into your blood. And my mind spins into these crazy sets of, well, that's why they can't wear their gear around the fire stations or to the grocery stores, because the groin area is 400 times more absorptive. And my mind has become like a, I don't know, like a pyramid of statistics that you do it the same, anybody that's in this genre. So when we heard about that, it was staggering. So but I did want to tell you about Burned. You already know about it, but if your members don't know about it, for some years, Paul and I and our allies have been shadowed by a great filmmaker. His name is Elijah Yetter Bowman, and I'm sorry, their name is Elijah Yetter Bowman, and the team at Ethereal Film has been working with us to elevate this issue. So in January of 23, it was a great honor to be the guests of the International Association of Firefighters, and Ed Kelly premiered Burned to 2,300 members. And it shows the power of activism, of building a network, of staying in the game, and of science, and of all these great hands working together. Media, media has been so powerful for us. We think of you in your network, Jim Bernica, PJ, Frank, and Bobby from Fire Engineering, and everyone that's come into the fold. And what was so wonderful about the January event of Burned at the I only know it by acronym, but ALTS, ALTS, was so much healing took place, so much personal healing took place for me and Paul and people that I had been estranged from. And I absolutely love that I can see these people and hug them with my whole heart and feel it like I'd hug you. You know, I love hugging these men because it's the men. Sorry, but I got to be honest.
It's a fraternal hug. We'll call it a fraternal hug.
Right. It's so good to walk in a room and see them and really put my arms around them because, you know, I caused a lot of pain and I absorbed a lot of pain. Yeah,
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You didn't cause any pain.
I
You were
did.
causing an uproar.
I was
Okay?
causing an
You
uproar.
were causing an uproar. And
But
there were people who didn't want to hear it.
They didn't,
Okay?
and but my flaming arrows hurt, and you know that, and I have to acknowledge that. And I got to hear their side of what they were doing and why, for whatever reason, their perceptions. And so I acknowledge that, and it just is, you know, there's so much that I didn't know, and I was able to share what they didn't know, which they found shocking just as well. But the greatest moment when Paul and I were at one of the greatest moments was the introduction of the PFAS law firms. And these are three teams of lawyers, nationally known lawyers, that have done pro bono work for firefighters. All the 9/11 people they did pro bono for them. And that just moved me beyond anything. Um, so I know that Ed has chosen correctly and his team has chosen correctly for the law firms. What I'm thrilled about is that they are now looking at, in my conversations, they're not just working for career firefighters. They encompass everyone, call firefighters, volunteer firefighters, wildland, to sue for um, what my husband is suing for personal injury. They are also looking at wrongful death. And I've spoken with you about this, Steve, that, you know, I speak with so many wives who, after their husbands pass of cancer, they're left becoming mommy and daddy, and they're also left with loss of funds. And you know, at some point in time, somebody has got to address wrongful death, and
Right.
the PFAS law firms are doing that. But what a moment when Ed Kelly filed his lawsuit in, I think it was Brockton, Mass, against the NFPA with these triad of law firms. You know, that'll take another 2 hours if we went down that road. But I once believed that it was a neutral organization until I started doing my own research.
You
There's
weren't
no
the only
way.
one.
Yeah.
You weren't the only one. Because until I learned from you and Jim Bernetka and Sean and Jeff, I thought they
Yes.
were just the nice rule-making guys to keep us safe.
Right.
Okay. And then it was last year when they asked for public submissions.
Yes.
Okay. And thousands of us wrote. Okay.
Yes.
I got thing that said, thank you for your submission, but we're not going to use it. What do you mean? They didn't accept any of them? No, they didn't accept a single one of the outside voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, are you kidding me? Then I said, who the hell do you think you are?
That's right. That's right.
You don't lord over us.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
you,
apparently they do.
yeah,
And this is again why it's extraordinary when you peel back the onion layers
mm,
on who knew what and when they knew it. and what they did about it. And I'll send you a couple of my Medium articles that show how long and reaching the arms are on this subject within the NFPA, and how not having a safety protocol in place for a safety institution, you have to look at that and say, was that intentional?
Mhm.
One of the things that in researching is that you begin to cross-reference names with high-ranking members. And there's an organization, or there's a committee of within the NFPA, and it is a prestigious committee, and it's the research, science and research team, or something to that effect. It's in one of my Medium articles. And you pretty much have to be chosen for that. And I was astonished to see Johnson Controls, Johnson Controls is on that science and research. One of their executive directors, I guess, is on that science and research. So this is where the information that isn't getting out to the fire service is in such a quagmire of documents that it's very easy to believe that there were well-intended people in high places that didn't warn the service. And that brings me back to media and why media is so important. Because I got a call one day from my dear friend, Fire Engineering Chief Bobby Halton,
May rest in
Editor-in-Chief.
peace. Yeah.
May he rest in peace. God bless him. And he said to me, "Kid, I'm worried about you, kid." He says, I was invited to a meeting to mess with Diane Cotter. And he didn't tell me who it was at that point in time. It was maybe a year later that he told me who it was. It was John Granby, the Senior Vice President of Lion Gear's Corporate Responsibility, who sits on Lisa Murkowski, Senator Lisa Murkowski's Federal Firefighter Caucus. Lion Gear, I don't know how many committees they sit on within the NFPA, but they're in all of your turnout gear committees. That's how it's done.
Exactly. But thanks to you and Paul and other people, as we said, Jim and Jason and Sean and others, and the people from Last Call Foundation and the producers of your film, we may be a year or two late, but we're getting there. We are getting that message out, and we're teaching at the same time.
100%.
We're not. What I really like is the fact that the whole, I guess, really since General President Kelly came in, is the fact that a lot of the discussion that I even see on social media and in the trades is we're no longer castigating people. That's going to be one thing we're going to do, and we're going to be the best firefighter. We're going to be the best firefighters we can. We're going to protect our people, our men and women who are firefighters, whether they're career, volunteer, part pay, WUI. We're going to protect our communities. Yeah, we got to deal with this, but it's not going to stop who we are and what we do.
I want to add that one of the other resolutions was that only peer-reviewed science would be accepted by the international. Yeah. And that was your friends in Florida that did that. And I'm blown away by the science team of Danny Wu, Derek Irwin, and Neil McMillan. And I can tell you they're watching social media, and when they see misinformation, they combat misinformation. There's no gray area anymore.
Yeah. There can't be. We can't allow it. We would not allow it in anything else. If it was a factory, Joe Schmo factory manufacturing widgets, And there had been, over the 3 years, there had been 19 deaths in that. The agency, every agency that looked over them would be on their case, be in that building, finding out what the hell's going on.
100%.
Because we're firefighters or police officers or EMTs, and by the way, folks, you have to understand, oftentimes paramedics and EMTs also wear bunker gear, depending on the call and where they're going, what they're doing. And a lot of our firefighters who specialize in rescue, even if it's not a fire, have to wear the bunker gear as for protection. So this gear is, you can make our stations, our firehouses as safe as possible. Extractors and HEPA filters and all the AC units, everything like that. But if we still go out on our job and that gear we're putting on is poisoning us, then all that fancy stuff in the station isn't going to do anything for us, because we won't be run long enough to enjoy it. We'll either have to go in for treatment or we check out. And we're tired of seeing firefighters have to check out because of cancer, both in the general meaning of it and in the explicit meaning of that. We're tired of it. We don't want more. We don't want more. And thankfully, we're seeing education spread, more instructors coming out to talk about it. We just saw, matter of fact, that last week, right after the interview I had with Alberto and Natasha, part of their team was going to the west coast of Florida to do 2 days of classes out there, in the Naples, Fort Myers area, where our good friend Joe DeVito. And when I saw that, I was thrilled. If I was, I was still up to making longer drives, I would have probably just driven across the peninsula just to be there to listen to it. And I think that with people like you and the teams behind you, it's not one team, you have lined up these teams who are not just for you and Paul, but are there for us.
Yes.
Excuse me. This is going to make the difference. This is going to bring reality to those who are still in the manufacturing and they're in their own fantasy worlds.
Right.
It's going to hit them. It's going to, number one, it's going to tarnish their name and their record. Number two, it's going to cost them big money, because the teams that are working this, like Mr. Malott and his team and the other teams the IAF has brought up, we're going to mention them in a minute. They're all working not just for those who have dealt with it now, but their goal is that by what they do today, they can stop this from continuing to happen tomorrow.
Correct. It's education. And I love that Jason always says that it's education, and he uses three terms, but he always mentions the education, because it has to be education, legislation, and there's one other one, but he's a great orator. And when you see him in Burned, he's also the executive director of Last Call. And I don't know if we mentioned it. We may have. I've forgotten already, Steve.
That's all right.
But Last Call is going to let any firehouse watch Burned at no cost. So what you want to do is go to Last Call Foundation's website, and you'll have it in your show notes. And I guess there's some button or some link that you'll be able to access, and within maybe 72 hours, you'll be able to get the link to watch Burned, Protecting the Protectors. And I don't think we mentioned that Mark Ruffalo is the executive director.
No, we didn't. I saw something yesterday on Twitter, and it just so happened it was yesterday, and I saw Mark and his post. And he said, oh, I know, it was a response to something on Burned. And so he said, I am so grateful and humbled that I was able to be the executive producer of that. And,
That's amazing.
when I talked to people about it, and I kept telling them about Rob Bilott, they said, I don't know who that is. I said, did you see the movie
Dark waters.
Dark Waters? He said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, the attorney, Mark Ruffalo. Oh, Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, no, the attorney was Rob Bilott. It was played by Mark Ruffalo. And, and I remember, I think when Jason Burns was uh, on the podcast, not when we did the webinar, but when it was on the podcast, I think that we had that kind of a joke that says we got to know who the real Rob Bilott is, but the fact that Mark Ruffalo, who also wanted this part on Dark Waters. I mean, he really felt he has that concern for the environment.
Oh, yeah.
That's been who he is. This is nothing new for him, and to know that he had started speaking up about it also. I think we also, matter of fact, I think we actually quoted something when we did the webinar that Mark Ruffalo had stated about what it was like to play Rob Bilott and how important it was, not just as a role, but as a learning lesson for him
Of
as well.
course.
And
Sure.
and he's been an environmental supporter for years and years. And to him see that comment yesterday and knowing I was having you on, oh, that was what it was. It was in response to somebody who answered my post. I think that's what it was. Somebody responded to my post about having you on today. And I think he talked about burn and said, I'm just so lucky that I was able to be associated as the executive producer.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. And you know what? And everything I've seen about this guy since I didn't know about him really that much. I'd probably seen him in early roles that I didn't know who he was. But when I started following him after Dark Waters, because I figured, I was thinking, this might be a guy for. I had no idea you guys were talking with him, Eddie, but I said, wow, that was a pretty powerful film. I wonder if this guy would do anything for firefighter cancer. No, I had no idea. It was just something that I saw him, but to know that you have somebody who doesn't need a penny in life per se, very successful actor, but who will take the time away from his professional career to be a good citizen in this country and help the men and women who help the citizens of this country, men and women of this country.
He plays a superhero, but he really is a superhero.
Yeah. Yeah, we just like him in the flesh and not in the green, but that's okay. But you know what? I take that back. I wouldn't mind seeing the big green guy walk through
Uh-huh.
an FPA meeting.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome. So, where do you see us now? Let's look maybe towards the next 5 years. What do you see happening? Because this is not the end. I don't want anybody to misunderstand this podcast and what you and I are sharing, that, okay, well, we got these people representing us, so we're all set. We're not all set. We're
No,
not all set.
no, there's so much happening. First of all, we can talk about Capitol Hill, and there was President Kelly gave directly to President Biden
Mhm.
that the legislation that's going to financially help cities and towns to replace your turnout gear with PFAS-free gear. The problem that I have is that that's going to generate even more money for the corporations that we're suing, men and women like my husband. I'm hoping that somewhere there is some um, mechanism to make sure that corporations have to pay back the cities and towns to replace the gear that they knew was impregnated with carcinogens. So hopefully there'll be something along the lines of that eventually. But we do have to continue with the education. Um, you can trust but verify in your daily life. There's so much to come of it. We just have to keep making sure that our young generation, Paul and I, although we didn't ever discuss it publicly, but we have a son. I guess the secret's out now on the Worcester Fire Department. And
I'm not
we have
surprised.
to and we have to make sure that that generation understands there are safety protocols that you can take now to protect yourself so that you're not getting that diagnosis in 10 years, because that's an awful diagnosis to hear.
Yeah.
We just have to keep fighting and elevating and elevate those that are doing righteous work
Yeah. I had a
like you.
conversation with someone too, that I believe that there should be a course in every academy, in every fire academy, about cancer in our gear, cancer in the fire service,
Yes.
PFAS in our
Mhm.
gear. Everybody should be on the same page the day they go the first day in the firehouse.
Right.
And if it's in a volunteer department, because we still require certifications for our firefighters and volunteer and part pay, certainly in WUI, that part of that training should be information about cancer in the fire service. Where we see it, what we know is can be leading to it, and how do we avoid that and what we have to do. Because I've been an educator for my entire life, basically.
Mhm.
Jeff, when Jeff was on, we talked about the same thing, because Jeff and Sean and Jim, once he and I got kind of like finally calmed down and we weren't at each other, we finally had a great, and he did a great podcast when I had him on.
Right.
But the fact is that no matter what we're doing, it still takes education. Right now, our fight is to educate the manufacturers that we are not sitting back and accepting whatever they say anymore.
Right.
We are not going to just blindly accept their money. Okay, I guess my audio was down a little bit. Thank you for that note. And that education is going to be the way, especially for new firefighters coming in, that they will know how to protect themselves to the best of the ability that we can, because none of us knew about that. We had no
That's
idea
right.
that we had to protect ourselves from other than the fires that we fight, or the chemicals we dealt with, or the whatever we had to deal with. That's what we were concerned about. Certainly not putting on our bunker gear every day.
Never. You should have never had to have been worried about that. Never.
Exactly.
But the propaganda machine was in force.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
rules, the
Without
rules were,
bent.
the rules were already made. Yeah.
Yeah. And the stories were already fabricated, and so everybody had a reason. And now, thank goodness, we have the people who have special X-ray glasses, and they can look through that phony baloney and know the truth. And thanks to those people, and to you and your team and everybody you sent those emails to, we all know now. It's out there. The genie, the cork is off the bottle, and the genie ain't going back in.
No way.
Yep.
That's a great way to
the
say
way.
it.
Well, Diane, I can't thank you enough for taking time, especially this is the last episode for our 7th season. Almost the last episode of the podcast, but we're moving ahead to start up again in August with season 8. And
I'm so happy to hear that, Steve.
I guess
I'm
I didn't
so
tell you. Sorry.
personally happy to
Yeah,
hear that.
but it's I'm doing well enough now that I'm actually booking travel to Boston in August for my nephew's wedding. So that'll be my first major travel since January of 2020. But I'm feeling better enough, and I think that I'm well enough I can make that trip. But you've really been, well, definitely an inspiration to me, you and Paul. I guess because even though I was long gone out of Framingham, you never take the kid out of his town and his community, and Worcester was right there.
I can still hear your accent.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, people say, well, you only lived in North Carolina for 4 years. How come you have a Southern accent?
Oh, I
I said,
wasn't
I don't
talking
have a,
about your Southern accent.
I said, I don't have a Southern accent. I said, I have a, but I'm on the other hand, I'm not your cousin from Boston. I'm not that either. So, but you know what? I've had the blessing of living in various parts of the country and doing stuff that I really cared about. And it wasn't the path I originally planned, but sometimes the good Lord works in mysterious ways. And
Doesn't he
somebody said,
though?
well, wouldn't you rather go back and be the rabbi you wanted to be? I said, not now. No, I got to be a firefighter that I probably never would have been if I had been an EMT and
And
taking
a
care of
teacher.
people. And teacher, yeah, I started that when I was 13. That's when I first got hired at $1 an hour to teach my classmates. But the fact is that you guys are role models for all of us, for every firefighter. And those that came before us.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's tough. I know it is.
Yeah,
It's tough. It's been a tough journey, and I'm so sorry that you folks never knew, and I'm horrified that you never knew and what was done to you.
yeah,
Um, and there was a great article by a North Carolina team about being guinea pigs. I don't know if you saw it, but
no,
you've
yeah,
got great support, and North
yeah,
Carolina has been terrific with
yeah,
this. I can't wait to share their information with you, but like they said so well, we were the guinea pigs
yeah,
for industry.
yeah,
What a damn shame.
yeah. And I think the best thing to come out of that is for the public to know that it's not just firefighters.
Right.
Okay, industry uses every person
That's right.
as one thing and one thing only: cash generator,
Yeah.
and they'll tell us anything to get our money.
Uh, we've heard so many things that the money is put aside for these cases long before a case is even discovered. I'm going to put in a plug, if you don't mind, for
Not at all.
someone that I've worked with for 4 years now. Her name is Miranda Spivak. She's a Washington Post journalist, a Fulbright scholar, and she just announced she has a publishing book deal. The name of the book is States Secrets. It's going to be by New Press, and former Washington Post reporter and fund for the investigative journalism author Miranda Spivak. Narrative told through the accounts of 5 accidental activists about the underreported rise in secret deal making between local governments and corporations, and how these agreements threaten our health, safety, and democracy. Due for publication in spring 2025 by Peter Bernstein and Amy Bernstein at Bernstein Literary Agency. And I'm happy to tell you I'm one of the 5.
And I'm not surprised by that at all, because you belong there. That's who you are and what you did. So you are and what you did. So to my friend Diane and Paul, thank you so very much for everything you've done. I wish we could take it back so you didn't have to do it. And
Thank you for being part of the team,
he may have
Steve.
he may have retired by then if he had stayed on, huh? Or by
Yeah,
retired by now, yeah.
he'd be retiring right about now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you told me the year, and so I was thinking, yeah, he'd be closer to me by
Yep,
by this point.
65.
But just everything you've done for the betterment, not just for Paul, but for the betterment of the fire service as a whole. No specific branch, just all of us.
All of you.
And to know that the IAFF is working not just for career firefighters.
Yes.
They're working for all firefighters.
That's right. I'm so proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of that. That means everything.
Oh, sure does. And that's part of who the new leadership is. And with
Oh,
General
without a
President
doubt.
Kelly, that's it. It's we have a great captain at the helm right
Oh,
now.
and
And
that's where the release and the smile comes from is
right,
because, you know, it's not my worry anymore.
right.
You've got the
Got the best,
greatest.
the best, the best. Thank you so much. Give my love to Paul and the family
Yes.
and to your
And my
grandkids
love
as
to
well.
Ruth
We
and the
we
kids
share.
and the grandbabies.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right,
Thanks,
folks.
Steve.
If you're watching the video, this is going to be the end. If you listen to the audio, well, you know what's going to happen. We're going to take a break. We'll have a couple of messages, and then we'll be back with a little bit more of the programming right after this. So thank you for tuning in if you've been watching the video. Thank you for listening if you're listening to the audio. And we'll be right back after this. For those of you leaving us, we will see you in August, towards the end of August. We launch the 8th season. Hard to believe, man. 8th season of Five Alarm Task Force. And don't forget, we do have our nonprofit Five Alarm Task Force Corp. And one of the things that we do, which is the most important thing that we do, and Diane, I should have mentioned this when Diane brought up the families that are left, the widows who lose their husbands or the husbands who lose their wives in firefighting, which is that we have one purpose and one purpose only in our nonprofit, and that is to provide some sort of immediate cash assistance to a family of a firefighter, male or female, in dire need. It is now, we started in the middle of the pandemic in October 2020, and to date, we've donated nearly $6,000, and the vast majority of that money has gone to families of 7 or 8 brothers who died in the line of duty. So that's where our money goes. So when you make a donation to us, that's where that money goes. Doesn't go to our if it goes into our foundation account, any donation is basically put into our foundation account, not to operations, the foundation. And then as soon as we see a story in the trades or get a phone call, we research it, we vet it, and then we'll get a check out to the right person, whether it's a family member, the chief of the department, whoever, to get them some fast cash right away. And that's what we do. That's our only purpose. Hopefully we'll have our webinars scheduled for the late summer, early fall, and we'll be able to raise money from that as well. But right now we do need your help. So you're not going to be hearing a lot because we're going on our summer break, but please remember who we are, Five Alarm Task Force Corp, and what we do. We're one family, one mission, helping first responders, our brothers and sisters. And that's it. So we'll be back. We'll see you in August. Until then, take care of each other, stay safe, and stay well. Bye-bye now.